Aaron Copland, William Schumann, Darius Milhaud, Jacques Ibert, all these composers have in common that they've been commissioned by the Louisville Orchestra. And now that group is inviting 3 new names as part of a residency called the Creator Corps. I'm Colleen Phelps, and I was joined by the introductory class as well as Jacob Gottlib from the orchestra to tell me about this new residency.
Well, this is the auspicious moment that all of these composers get to meet each other. So I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. Let's start with Tyler.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Taylor. I'm a Louisville native composer performer, and it's great to be here.
And TJ?
Hi, I'm TJ Cole. I am also a composer. I'm originally from Atlanta, and I'm really excited to start working in Louisville.
And Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Bialava, and I'm in Manhattan. And I'm starting to pack because I can't wait to be with you all driving out there really soon.
And Jacob is here from the Louisville Orchestra. Jacob, you introduce yourself too.
Hi, I'm Jacob Gottlib. I'm the Creative Neighborhood Residency Program Manager at the Louisville Orchestra, and I'm very excited to help run this new initiative by the orchestra, the Creators Corps.
Tell us about the genesis of the Creators Corps.
So this is an idea that has been kind of percolating in Teddy Abrams's mind for quite some time, as many of his great ideas tend to. And he wanted to do 2 things. He wanted to first find a way to connect this orchestra's present to its heritage. So as many people know, the heritage of the Louisville Orchestra is living composers and contemporary music. For a long time, basically from the beginning, the orchestra has staked its reputation on sustaining living composers. And it was one of the orchestras that commissioned the most living composers in the world, particularly in the first half of the 20th century with its first edition series. And it was the first orchestra to create a record label to release the recordings of these commissions. So, Teddy was thinking of a way to connect the orchestra's present to this heritage, to this kind of founding ethos of being an orchestra for living composers. And then the second is that Teddy was trying to think of ways to kind of revise the typical composer residency model. So most of the time when orchestras invite composers to be in residence, they're not actually in residence for more than maybe a week or so. Typically what happens is an orchestra commissions a composer to write a piece, then they work on that piece, and then the orchestra brings them to their town for a week of rehearsals, maybe some community engagement activities and so forth. Then the premiere happens and everyone goes home. But what Teddy and the orchestra had in mind for this is to make it an actual residency where we invite the composers, we call them creators, to come and live in Louisville for a substantial period of time, at least 1 season, so that they can be basically town composers. They can be involved in the local community. They'll live here. They'll work with people here. They'll connect with institutions, organizations, and other musicians here, so that they could be basically kind of civic artists, because this has to do with kind of the current perspective of the orchestra, as the orchestra is a civic institution. It's not just an organization that performs music and performs concerts. It's something that's deeply embedded in the community and acts in a civic way. And one of Teddy's ideas is that we could bring composers to also function in this way as civic artists in this way. So this season 22-23 is our very first iteration of the Creators Corps, and we're very excited about that.
So what was for each of you the draw to a program like this? Tyler, you already have an association with Louisville, so let's start with you.
So there are a lot of different levels for what makes this an appealing program, but I'll start with the idea of the community engagement. For me personally, I've had a lot of issues with access in the world of classical music. And I think that there's a lot of things that I would like to try to do during this residency that can kind of help address breaking down some of those barriers. But specifically, as someone who comes from, a very financially modest family, a single mom, also like my socioeconomic background, there's a lot of things that don't really give a lot of context for being a classical composer. So I want to try to go out into the community and reach people who might feel that they don't belong in the classical music world, or they don't belong going to an orchestra, or they don't belong as composers, people, creative people in a musical setting, and seeing if I can share music with them in that capacity. Additionally, just as someone who has, was born and raised in Louisville, essentially, I've been going to the orchestra for years, and it's always kind of been the backbone of the musical setting that I've been brought up in. So all through high school and all through undergrad, I was going and singing the orchestra. And I even remember when I was in elementary school going out to sing the orchestra through some of the sort of field trip things that we would do. So it's always been an entity that's been there in a significant way in shaping me and what I do. So I'm extremely excited to be able to work with them in that capacity as a composer.
TJ, what was the big draw for you?
Yeah, I mean, to sort of piggyback off of what Tyler was saying, I have been interested in community engagement projects for a number of years now, but to like have the powerhouse support of in a musical institution like an orchestra is pretty huge, and seems like a really incredible opportunity. Also, it's like incredibly rare, at least I've found, to have like a year of like financial stability as a composer where you can just sort of like focus on your art making and focus on like how that is engaging with the community, and like it feels a bit more important or something to have that community engagement component. Yeah, I've also just always been drawn to like writing for orchestra. I love working with like big sound worlds. And like one of the things that I'm particularly excited about that the orchestra is offering is that we get these readings where we can just sort of workshop material. We don't have to have things like perfected or like finished. Something that I've like sort of learned in working with orchestras in the past is that like you write your piece, you get maybe like anywhere from like 5 to 20 minutes to like sit and workshop your piece with the orchestra, and like you don't really get to change a lot. It's like in and out, it's pretty quick. This is like extremely integrated. This is like many weeks getting to like go hear the orchestra, getting to know the musicians in the orchestra, getting to workshop material. I mean, it's a dream to be able to like work with an orchestra this closely.
Lisa?
It's so great to hear you both talk about these things, because this is, as you mentioned, is the first time we're encountering each other. And one of the things that drew me to the program was the possibility of a Tyler and a TJ. There's something really wonderful about coming into a community, especially because I'm older than they are. I'm like a big sister, and I'm coming into a community where I can function in this kind of just sort of a kind of a capacity, really get to know the people that are along that I'm alongside. But for me, personally, one of the things about this program that's so remarkable and that made me really feel like it was right for me is going back to something that Jacob, that you said. There's a great history in Louisville Orchestra of doing things for composers and supporting new music. But composers, and that's great. We do need support. I mean, we do need to make a living. I mean, it's not easy, and especially now. I had 95% of my income wiped out in March 2020, gone. However, we're not just the recipient of. We're not just needing help. We actually want to be part of our communities. We want to be part of our communities, and it goes beyond giving back. It's not a reciprocal thing. We want our work. We want our role as creative people and citizens to be integrated. And I've been doing this for years myself, but this is the very first time that I've worked with a major orchestra like this that also shares, this is demonstrating through a program that is as robust as this, demonstrating this desire, which is really of our time, right? This desire for art makers to be in the world, and not as a separate activity, not as outreach. What are you reaching outside of, towards? I mean, you know, it's about engaging in and living in community. It's just tremendous what they're building. And so I've never been to Louisville, but I can't wait.
Well, that goes right along with my next question, because I read about each of your work and I had a sort of key word that I wanted to ask you to expand on. So a word that sort of got triggered when I read your bio and looked at your body of work. And Lisa, your word was location, because that seems to be
Interesting,
an
yeah.
instrument for you sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, like TJ, I mean, I'm drawn to larger forces, and I always have been. And this is not about sort of just grandness. This is about a sonic affinity for certain kinds of sounds. But I also have a really, I read a lot of urban planning, and I'm very interested in the way in which cities function, and the way people live together in places. I've only ever lived in cities. Some composers are inspired by nature. Their muse is nature, or their muse is their loved one, or their, you know. For me, I think just people, like civic life. The city is my muse. And so I've really wanted to make work in not just different cities, but also in the hearts of cities. Find out what locations in those cities, what do they sound like? How do people use them? What did they used to be? How are people using those spaces now? How do we interpret the spaces that we inhabit together as citizens of a place? That's really interesting to me. And I think there's something in that these days, with our concerns about climate justice, and with our concerns about intergenerational cooperation around the challenges we're facing. I mean, this is the place where all that kind of thinking and living is happening. And that's where I want to make the work.
Tyler, the word that popped up immediately for you was identity. Even in your own artist statement, that's sort of the first keyword you use. Can you expand on how that influences your work?
Absolutely. So I am a person of mixed race, and it's a really interesting, maybe not so unique space to occupy, but an interesting space to occupy nonetheless. Sort of navigating a world between these two cultures and identities that can sometimes seem very polar. Specifically, my dad is Black and my mother is white. For me personally, there is a sense sometimes of contradiction in that most basic sense of who and what I am. I guess, like physically, and then of course the way that manifests in my day-to-day life as a person, and then of course artistically. So I've found ways to channel that sort of inner conflict in my own music. And I would say it's never come down to being something super literal. It's always kind of just explorations of different ways that I can kind of grapple with this in my music. But and some of my later pieces, the subject matters become a little bit more explicit. For instance, the piece that I wrote for the Louisville Orchestra last year, that was a collaboration with a poet, Dr. Tatiana Wells. Her piece was very much explicitly about Blackness in America in this moment, and a lot of the injustices and inequities that are happening. And my piece responded to that poem. And so that's something that I am, extremely personally connected to and very passionate about. So seeing the ways that I can interact with that and try to channel that into my own music is I guess, paramount to my artistic expression.
TJ, I came up with a few words that I could have used as a keyword for you, but I would love to just let you expand on how you often make a visual association with your music.
Yeah. So I have something called synesthesia, which is, it can manifest in a few different ways, but basically I have this, I guess it's sort of like a natural ability to like associate visuals with sound. So like if I'm listening to music, like I don't physically see it, but my brain will sort of like create like textures, colors, movement, layers sometimes. And sometimes I get a more like potent response to some music than to other music. And I think a big part of what I'm after is influenced by my synesthesia and this like sort of fascination of like, um, what is it about the tactile world, like my physical surroundings, and the relationship between like what is being like naturally created in the brain. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. I'm like still sort of like ruminating over all of this. Um, but yeah, I think figuring out that like relationship between abstraction and like physical world and like how that makes people like feel things or experience things is something that I am often thinking about when I'm creating something.
So the three of you are about to start this new program, which I'm sure comes with a lot of excitement and maybe even nervousness and a lot to look forward to. And so that probably brings you a lot of kinship with the many, many students now that it's the end of July who are about to enter composition programs for the first time as students in college. What piece of advice do you have for these new, I won't say composers to be because they're surely already composing, but for these students who are sort of looking out into the world and thinking it's everything's ahead of them, what would you suggest they consider as they go into their school programs? Let's start with TJ.
Yeah, I think one of the things that sort of helped me the most, and I also sort of wish I had explored it a bit more when I was like just starting to compose, was just the willingness to experiment and just like fail a lot and just like try so many different things. I remember like finding like dancers at my school and like writing little pieces for them to like choreograph to. I remember messing around with like electronics a little bit. I wrote for myself to perform, I wrote for others to perform. I think just like trying lots of different things and being really curious, even if you think you're not going to resonate with it or you're not going to like it, like just sort of try everything to like really figure out what it is that resonates with you.
Lisa?
Yeah, well, two things come to mind if I can say two things, which is weird because I actually never got a degree in composition, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but that's related to the first thing because I majored in French literature and I came from a musical family, so I was already, I mean, I had a lot of advanced training as a kid, and that was, I mean, I had an incredibly privileged sort of musical upbringing for which I'm incredibly grateful. I landed at college and thought like, well, there's this amazing literature department. Why don't I major in literature? I didn't realize at the time that, you know, I thought I was sort of turning away from music and wasn't sure why that was, but it wasn't that way because in fact, what I did was my literature studies really deepened my relationship with music, and they have continued to sort of be sort of underpinnings the way that TJ describes sort of visual things. I mean, my work is often partnered by language and narrative thoughts. And the other thing I would just say too is, you know, that I often say to young composers when I'm working with them, it's easy when you're in a program because you're studying with someone and you admire people to kind of like try to build relationships diagonally upwards to people that you admire. But the great thing about being in school with a bunch of other people studying music is the people sitting right next to you are the ones who are going to be making the musical world in the future. And so making relationships, those kinds of relationships, I've seen a couple generations now just come into the field and like, it's tremendous how those kinds of communities, those generational communities can leverage a new energy in the field.
Tyler?
I have a couple of ideas. First and foremost, listen, listen to everything as much as you can. Go to your music libraries and just flip through every score that you can. Keep an open mind. This is your time to just kind of absorb everything and then let it all out. You know, throw some stuff out on the page, kind of like TJ was saying, and just get your hands dirty. Your time in school or in whatever institution you're going to be in, or just even this time during your life, is a time to experiment and to really learn and to really grow. And you know, there really is no limit to what you can do at this moment. It's just your own creativity and your own imagination. So go for it.
Jacob, what can Louisville Orchestra audiences expect to hear from this great group of composers this year?
Oh, they will be featured in all kinds of ways throughout the season. So there's going to be 3 world premieres of 3 brand new orchestral works that these 3 are writing. 1 will be in January and 2 will be in March as part of our Festival of American Music. You'll be able to hear some of their works as part of the orchestra's Music Without Borders series. Those are tentatively slated to take place in J-Town, in Shelby Park, and in the California neighborhoods of Louisville. And they're all going to be working on education and community engagement projects throughout the season that are going to be in various stages of progress throughout the year. So they're going to be in town. They're going to be out and about, particularly in Shelby Park. Make sure you come and meet them and say hi to them. And I hope I can speak for all of you when I say that we're very excited to have them here.
Like Jacob said, you can hear from the Creator Corps all throughout the season with the Louisville Orchestra, and we'll give you the inside track on all these new pieces of music on WUOL.